I found a box in my house and now I remember lives that aren't mine. Reddit Sci-Fi story. I don't think I slept properly after that first night. Even when I closed my eyes, my mind kept replaying that one moment. The flicker of recognition on the old man's face, the way he tried to speak but couldn't, and the feeling, that deep unsettling pull in my stomach like something ancient had just stirred. I tried to tell myself it was just nerves, that I'd never been away from home this long, and that unfamiliarity always dresses itself in the costume of dread when you're alone. But the truth is, I knew even then that something had latched onto me. Something invisible but insistent. At first it was little things. The sensation of being watched when I was sure I was alone, the flicker of movement in mirrors just outside my peripheral vision, and the subtle, near-silent humming that began echoing through the pipes at night. I chalked it up to the old building, the creaks and groans of age settling into its bones, until the humming began following me outside. I'd sit at the park down the street, hoping fresh air might reset me, only to realize the sound had made its way there too, low and rhythmic, threading itself through the rustle of leaves like a song I was never meant to hear. I started keeping lights on at night, one in every room. I'd leave the TV playing soft static just to mask the quiet, because in that silence the humming turned into whispers. Not words, at least not ones I understood, but intonations that felt wrong, like syllables formed in a throat that had forgotten how to speak. My neighbors were no help. I tried asking the woman across the hall if she'd heard anything strange, and her reaction was too fast, too firm. No. Nothing. Must be in your head. She smiled the way people do when they're lying to protect themselves, not you. That smile stayed with me as much as the whispers. Then came the box. I found it on my kitchen table one morning, even though I locked the door religiously and live alone. A small wooden box with no markings, no hinges, and no visible way to open it. I thought someone was playing a prank. Maybe one of the neighbors, maybe even a friend who somehow got in without my knowing. But when I picked it up, it felt wrong. Too heavy for its size. Too cold, like it had just been pulled from deep underground. I tried to ignore it. I really did, but the box became an obsession. I'd wake up with it at the foot of my bed. I'd find it in the fridge. Once I discovered it tucked neatly under my pillow. Always closed. Always silent. I was beginning to lose track of time. Days blurred into nights and back again. I couldn't remember what I'd eaten, or if I'd eaten at all. Work became a fog. I'd show up and leave without knowing what had happened in between. My coworkers stopped asking questions. I think they were scared, or maybe they'd stopped seeing me altogether. Then, one night, the whispers changed. They gained form, structure. I heard my name, not in the way a friend might call out from across a street, but softly, drawn out, like someone had been repeating it for hours behind a wall, just waiting for me to listen. I remember screaming. I don't remember stopping. And then the box opened. Not with a crack or a snap, but as if it had always been open and I'd only just realized. Inside was a single folded photograph, faded, torn at the edges, but unmistakable. It was me. A child version of me, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, holding the hand of a man whose face had been deliberately scratched out. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was the woman in the background. She was staring directly at the camera and at me. Her face was pale, blurred like motion captured mid-frame, but her eyes were crystal clear and identical to mine. I knew that face. I'd seen it every time I looked in the mirror, older and changed, but the structure was the same. It wasn't my mother. I asked, called her, crying, demanded answers. She told me quietly that I'd been adopted, that she was going to tell me eventually, that the orphanage where she found me had burned down years ago, that they never had records, only the name written on the bundle I was left in. But I'd never told her about the photograph, or the name etched in tiny script on the back. Return to her when she begins to remember. I stopped sleeping altogether. I stopped eating. The box never left my side. It seemed alive now, like it breathed with me, like it waited. I took it to the police. They laughed. Took it seriously until they opened it, found nothing inside, and told me I needed rest. Maybe a therapist, maybe a priest. I tried both. The therapist listened for exactly 1 hour and 34 seconds before recommending me to someone else. The priest wouldn't even touch the box. Said his hands burned when he came near it. That's when I decided to go back. Not home, not to my apartment, but to the place from the photograph. I had traced it by accident, recognizing the layout of the fence behind the house, a crooked gate I'd once seen in an old documentary about abandoned mental institutions. It wasn't a house at all. It was a hospital long shut down, condemned and forgotten. I drove there at dawn, the box on the passenger seat like a sleeping cat. I kept glancing at it, half expecting it to vanish, or speak or move. But it just sat there, humming faintly. The building was crumbling. Vines had wrapped themselves around the walls like the earth itself was trying to keep the place buried. I stepped through the rusted doors, and for the first time in days, the humming stopped. Silence filled the air, thick and absolute. I walked the halls as if pulled by a string. The deeper I went, the clearer my memories became. Not flashes, but full scenes sitting in a sterile room, coloring pictures of twisted trees. A voice singing lullabies I'd never heard but instantly recognized. I reached a door, room 70C. My hands shook as I pushed it open. Inside, dust floated like ghosts in the sunlight. There was a bed, a child's bed, and drawings on the walls, all of them of the same woman. My face again and again, as if I'd spent years trying to remember myself. Then I heard it, the voice just behind me whispering my name. But when I turned, the room was empty. Only the box remained, now open again, revealing something new. A single, jagged key. My breath caught. I didn't know what it unlocked, but I knew what it meant. Something was waiting to be set free. Or returned. I don't remember walking back to my car. I only remember the key burning in my hand, the sense of urgency flooding my chest like cold water. That night, I dreamed of the woman again. This time, she was standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes filled not with malice, but with unbearable sorrow. She whispered just 2 words before fading into the dark, "I'm sorry." When I woke, the key was gone. The box was sealed again, and my apartment felt still, peaceful almost. But I knew it wasn't over. I knew it had only just begun, because the next morning there was a knock at my door. No one ever knocked. I opened it slowly, heart thudding in my ears, and standing there was a child, pale, familiar, holding a box. My box. Except this time their eyes were mine, and they were crying. I didn't understand. Not then. But I do now. The cycle hadn't chosen me. It had grown from me. I wasn't the victim. I was the origin. They say the past sleeps beneath us, quiet and unbothered until someone foolish enough starts digging without knowing what they're about to wake. And I wasn't just the fool. I was the invitation, the reason the past stirred at all. The days that followed weren't days, not in the sense I used to know them. There was no sunrise that brought peace, no sunset that gave closure. Time blowed forward without stopping to breathe, dragging me with it like a leaf caught in a river current I couldn't see but felt pulling harder with every hour. After the discovery in the attic, I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence, a remnant of a stranger's life somehow mistaken for a part of mine, but the photograph refused to let go. It changed. The first time I noticed was the third night, when I glanced at it in passing and realized the background was different. Subtle, but unmistakable. The shadows were deeper, the door behind me in the picture had cracked open ever so slightly. I stared at it for hours, certain I was imagining things, until the next morning when the photograph curled upward as if stretching in the warmth of the room and the child in the image. Me had moved closer to the door. I stopped sleeping in that room. But the photograph came with me. No matter where I placed it, locked it, or even burned it. Yes, I tried that too. I'd wake to find it resting on my nightstand, always cold, always humming faintly with something I couldn't name. People noticed I was slipping. I saw it in their eyes, that half-second hesitation when they greeted me, the way their sentences trailed off as if they sensed something behind me, not within me. My coworkers avoided my desk. My neighbor, the one who used to ask about my garden, started leaving her curtains drawn whenever I stepped outside. I wasn't changing on purpose, but something had begun peeling me apart layer by layer, and I was too numb to fight it. I began to dream of corridors. Endless ones, lined with doors that whispered as I passed. The dreams weren't dreams though, not really. I'd wake with bruises on my hands, dust beneath my nails, the taste of metal in my mouth. Once I woke with a rusty key clutched so tightly in my fist that it left the imprint in my palm for hours. I should have run. Should have found a hotel, or left town, or confessed everything to someone just to hear how insane it all sounded. But I didn't, because I knew, deep down, that whatever this was, it was tied to me, not the place. The box, the photo, the dreams. They weren't things I'd stumbled upon. They were things that had always been meant to find me. It was the 7th day that I saw her. I was walking through the old forest behind the house, trying to escape the suffocating silence of the rooms when I noticed movement between the trees. A figure. Not quite human, but not animal either. She didn't walk. She glided, feet never touching the leaves, face turned away. I should have been terrified, but there was something familiar about her. like remembering the scent of a place you've never visited but somehow missed. I followed her without question, through thickets that clawed at my arms, down paths that hadn't existed moments before, into a clearing I swear wasn't there last year. In the center stood an old well. Stone, covered in moss, the rope long gone. She hovered near it, unmoving, until I stepped closer. Then she turned, and it was me. Not like a twin or a doppelganger, it was me. Same scar on the eyebrow from when I fell as a kid, same faint freckle on the cheek that always appeared in the sun. But her eyes, my eyes, were empty, not blind, just devoid, hollow. She opened her mouth, but instead of words, there was that same humming. Louder now, clearer. And then I blinked, and she was gone. I don't remember walking back. I only remember the smell of smoke, the taste of ash in the air, and the realization that I'd been gone for 3 days. My phone had dozens of missed calls. My voicemail was full. My boss had left messages threatening to call the police. I didn't respond. Couldn't, because in those 3 days, something had changed. The house was different. Subtly at first, the hallways stretched longer than before, the mirrors no longer showed reflections but unfamiliar rooms behind glass. The lights flickered in patterns like Morse code, and sometimes I'd catch words in them. Remember, I started writing things down, scribbling in notebooks, margins of newspapers, my own skin when paper wasn't near, names I didn't know, dates that hadn't happened yet, symbols that made my vision blur when I stared too long. I stopped answering the door. Whoever knocked wasn't really knocking. They were tapping, in threes, always threes. Tap, 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 then silence, then breathing long and shallow as if the door had lungs and I was inches from being swallowed. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I took the box, the photograph, the key, and drove. Just drove, no direction, no destination. Miles of highway blurred beneath me until I saw it, the motel. Old, flickering sign half lit, the kind of place you avoid unless you're desperate. I was. I checked in, tossed the box on the bed, and tried to sleep. But as soon as I closed my eyes, I was back in that corridor, the one from my dreams. This time the doors were numbered. 7, 11, 19, 23. I stopped in front of room 34. The door pulsed, as if breathing. I reached for the knob and woke up screaming. The motel was on fire. Flames licking the curtains, smoke curling under the door. I grabbed the boxents and fled, barefoot, coughing, heart slamming against my ribs. Outside, the air was frigid. Emergency lights flashed red and blue, but I didn't wait. I ran, drove, vanished before anyone could ask questions. I drove until the road disappeared and only forest remained. I got out, stood in the cold dark, and opened the box for the last time. Inside was the photograph, but not of me anymore. Of her, the one I'd followed in the woods. And behind her, standing at the edge of the clearing, dozens of figures. Watching, waiting. All with my face. Some old, some young, some half, decomposed, others newborn, all frozen in silent agony. The humming began again. Not from the box, from the ground, from the sky, from inside me. And then I understood. This wasn't a curse, this was a calling. I wasn't haunted, I was being invited back to where I came from. Back to the well. Back to her. I should have run. But instead, I walked into the trees. There's something about the woods at night that feels older than fear itself, as if every branch remembers something it wishes it could forget. And every gust of wind carries a name no one should ever say aloud. And yet I walked into that darkness willingly, barefoot, bleeding, carrying the box that had never belonged to me, but somehow had always been mine. The trees parted for me like they recognized me, like they'd been leaning toward this moment for years, waiting for me to come home. Though I didn't yet understand what home meant in this place. Not anymore. I walked until I stopped feeling cold, until my breath no longer fogged the air, until the shadows didn't seem to fall away from the moonlight, but crawled toward it hungrily, feeding off it. And then I found the clearing again, the well waiting in its center like a wound in the earth. Open, raw, unhealed, but this time it wasn't alone. They were there, all of them, not ghosts exactly, not illusions either, but pieces, fragments of lives I hadn't lived yet, or maybe already had, lining the edges of the space with faces shaped like mine. But altered in small ways, one missing an eye, another holding a child with no mouth, one whispering into a jar of black liquid, another bleeding from the palms as if crucified by memory itself. None of them looked at me directly, but they all felt me. They knew I was the one they'd been waiting for, or maybe the one they'd sent away long ago and now regretted letting go. And standing in front of the well was her, the mirror woman, the version of me that should never have existed but did, her hair long and tangled with leaves, her skin gray with the ash of forgotten fires, her eyes hollow but deep, so deep that staring into them made my stomach twist as though I were falling from a height no one could survive. And when she raised her hand, everything stopped, the air stilled, the trees froze, even the moon held its breath, and she pointed. Not at the well, but at the box in my hands, and I understood, or thought I did, that this was the moment it had all been leading toward. The memories, the dreams, the doors in my mind that had been locked for years, and now began opening all at once with an awful rush of wind and screams and songs that had no melody, just rhythm, a beat like footsteps coming closer, and I opened the box again. For the last time, not because I wanted to, but because there was no choice left in me. The box was no longer wooden but bone, polished and etched with writing that pulsed like veins, and inside was not a photo, not a key, not anything I could name, but darkness itself, a swirling, moving thing that breathed and shivered, and it reached up, slowly curling tendrils around my wrists, gentle at first, then tighter, tighter, until I dropped to my knees before the well, and the woman knelt too, mirroring me perfectly, her movements exact, synchronized, like she was my shadow made flesh or I was hers finally returned, and she whispered, not aloud but into my mind, her voice not a sound but a presence, soft and ancient and full of grief. She said, this is where it began. And suddenly I was no longer in the forest. I was inside a room, white and sterile, the walls humming with electricity and the air buzzing with fluorescent light. I was a child again, small, afraid, watching doctors with cold hands insert needles into my veins, machines beeping beside me, papers with my name. My real name, not the one I'd grown up with. Being signed, stamped, filed away like I was a product, not a person, and outside the room, through a glass wall, I could see rows of other children, hundreds, maybe thousands, all with the same face, all versions of me, some crying, some screaming, some silent and still. And then the room began to burn, flames licking the edges of the walls, smoke flooding the vents, alarms blaring while the doctors ran, and I realized they hadn't meant for me to survive. None of us were supposed to. We were made, used, and discarded, and I was the only one who escaped, the only one who lived long enough to forget, long enough to become someone else. But the others, they remained, trapped in that moment, bound to the place where they died, and I had been the loose thread, the anomaly, the missing page in a story that was never meant to be read. And when the vision ended, I was back in the clearing, gasping, trembling, the box now empty in my lap, the woman gone, the others too, only the well remained. And something moved within it, not climbing out but sinking deeper, dragging the warmth of the world with it. And I heard the voice again, softer now, a lullaby barely above the rustle of leaves, telling me that forgetting had been my curse and remembering was my punishment, that I had been the echo of something broken and now I was the sound itself, complete, dangerous, necessary. And I stood, walked to the well, stared down into its endless dark, and saw not my reflection, but all of them, the others, were trapped beneath the surface like fish beneath ice, eyes open, mouths moving in silent harmony, their hands pressed upward as if asking for release or perhaps offering it, and I understood. I could not free them because I had never been the survivor. I had been the continuation, the next phase, the thing born not to live, but to carry memory forward, to anchor their pain into flesh again and again and again. And so I dropped the box into the well, watched it vanish without a sound. And when it was gone, the air changed, the forest exhaled, the shadows retreated, and I was alone again, truly alone. And for the first time it felt honest, because I wasn't afraid anymore, not of the dark, not of the truth, not even of what I was. I walked back through the forest, and every tree bowed, every root shifted aside, the sky cleared, and the moon followed me like an old friend, no longer judging, just watching. And when I returned to my house, it was different, smaller, dustier, as though it had aged 100 years in a single night, the walls warped, the mirrors blank, the windows fogged from the inside, and I sat on the floor, folded my legs, closed my eyes, and listened. Not for humming, not for whispers, but for silence. Because that's what remained now. Not peace exactly, but stillness, the kind that comes after a scream has ended and the echo has died. I don't sleep much now. I don't eat like I used to. I don't answer the phone or respond to my name, because names are fragile things, and mine has changed too many times to hold any meaning anymore. I live between seconds now, between the ticking of a clock and the space just before a shadow appears. And sometimes I see them still, in reflections, in dreams, in the shape of smoke against the sky. But I don't fear them. We're the same. After all, we are echoes, we are scars, and one day, when the world forgets us again, we will return, not for vengeance, not for closure, but simply to remind, because memory is the sharpest blade and we have learned how to use it. It's strange how easily the world forgets the things that matter most, how a place can swallow its history whole and pretend it never happened, how people walk past ruins every day and never feel the weight pressing up through the earth. But I feel it now more than ever. Not because I want to, but because I can't turn it off. Can't unlearn what's been etched into the marrow of my bones. Because once you've remembered the truth, the real truth, you can never return to the comfort of ignorance. It's like walking through a hallway and suddenly seeing the hidden door that's always been there, realizing the wallpaper never matched. The draft always came from one direction, and you wonder how you missed it for so long, except this isn't a door you open, it's a door that opens you. And now that I'm open, the world around me has changed in ways I don't even think others can perceive. I wake up not to sunlight but to flickering images on the wall, like a film strip running without sound, showing me moments from lives I never lived, but still remember in perfect clarity: the girl with the violin who fell through the ice, the boy in the concrete room drawing spirals until his fingers bled, the man standing in a desert staring at a tower made of teeth. All of them are me, or I am them, and the boundaries I used to cling to have eroded like sand, washed away by tides that do not belong to this world. I stopped going outside weeks ago, maybe longer. The clocks don't tick in this house anymore. They melt like wax. If I watch them too long, the hands twist backward and forward until time is nothing but a suggestion. I used to try to call people, to ask them if they remembered me, if they saw the same changes, but all I got was static, or silence, or voices that didn't match the mouths I knew, voices that spoke in riddles or names that left my tongue burned when I tried to repeat them. So I gave up, not out of despair, but because I realized communication was no longer something that came through wires or words. It was in the walls, in the air, in the vibrations of thought that didn't need language, just intention. And I began hearing it more clearly, the collective murmur of them. The others, not lost souls or spirits like the stories would have you believe, but echoes trapped in motion, caught in the cycle that created me, the repetition that turned possibility into inevitability. I understand now that I was never meant to survive that fire, that the reason I did wasn't luck or fate, it was design, an anomaly injected into the system to see what would happen, a fracture in the mirror to test how far the cracks could spread before the whole thing shattered. I wasn't alone in that test, though not entirely. There were others like me, scattered across different timelines, different experiments, variations of variables that all led back to the same equation, and some of them found ways to hide, to bury themselves in the mundane, to blend in and forget. But forgetting is a temporary solution to a permanent truth, and one by one they're being awakened again, the same way I was, by objects that shouldn't exist, by dreams that feel more real than daylight, by faces that aren't theirs staring back from windows that shouldn't reflect. I started to catalog them, sketch them, write down the coordinates of places they whispered to me in sleep, abandoned towns, sealed rooms beneath hospitals, staircases that descend further than architecture should allow. And I know someday I'll have to go to those places, to connect the fragments, to find the origin point, the prime moment where the first thread was pulled and the unraveling began. But not yet, because something is coming, something that feeds on remembrance, that grows stronger every time another one of us wakes up screaming and understands that the reality we live in is stitched together with lies and old bones. I feel it in the pressure changes, in the way birds fly in reverse for a few seconds before resetting, in the way shadows sometimes bend around corners faster than the light that casts them. I've seen people vanish mid-sentence, flicker like corrupted video before returning with new eyes and a different voice, like their body had been rebooted with another memory file, and they never notice. They continue on as if nothing happened, but I see it. I see all of it, and I write it down, page after page, wall after wall, the floorboards beneath me covered in scrawls and sigils that I don't remember learning, but my hand moves with certainty, like muscle memory inherited from a self I've never met. And sometimes when I finish one, I hear something respond, a knock from under the floor, a breath behind the mirror, a low laugh that echoes through the pipes, and I know they're watching me too, testing me, waiting to see if I'll succeed or fall apart like the others did. Sometimes I see them out the window, standing still in the field beyond the trees, too tall, too thin, with limbs that bend the wrong way and eyes that glow only when I blink. I don't approach them, and they don't come closer. Not yet. There's a truce between us, an unspoken agreement that as long as I continue my work, they'll keep their distance. But I don't trust it, because the rules of this world are changing, and I've begun to suspect that the truce was made long before I was born, signed in blood not mine, but carried in my veins nonetheless. I found a letter yesterday, folded neatly inside a wall I had no memory of breaking, addressed to me in handwriting that matched mine exactly but signed with a name I don't recognize. The letter said, "When the fourth door opens, do not run. It must see you. It must remember you. Only then will it end." And the moment I read it, I heard the fourth knock, soft, patient, deliberate, and the mirror in the hallway cracked down the center without being touched. I haven't opened that door yet, the one with no hinges and no knob, the one that only appears after the mirror breaks. But I know I will, because this isn't a story I can walk away from, not anymore. This is a loop, a ritual, a design, and I am the variable they can't control, but must include, the wild card that upsets the equation, but also fulfills it. And as I sit here, scribbling these words into the wallpaper, because the pages ran out and the lights won't stay on, I feel the house breathing again, slow and steady, as though preparing for something. The furniture has rearranged itself in a circle. The temperature has dropped enough for my breath to linger in the air, like ghosts waiting for permission to speak. And in the silence between the knocks, I can almost hear it. The sound of the door unlatching itself from the other side. The whisper of something very old clearing its throat, getting ready to speak my true name for the first and final time. And I know that when I hear it, I won't be afraid, I won't resist, because I've already stepped too far beyond the veil to pretend I'm anything but what they made me to be. Not a prophet, not a savior, not even a warning, but a reflection of the world they buried beneath this one. And once I open that fourth door, the reflection becomes real. The fifth knock didn't come like the others did. It didn't echo through wood or shake the mirror or ring from behind the walls. It came inside my head, clear and absolute, like a thought that did belong to me, carving itself directly into the space between memory and instinct. And in that moment, I realized something vital had changed. The house was no longer just observing me, it was listening, anticipating, as if everything I did was part of a script it had been rehearsing long before I was born, and now that I'd reached this point, this fifth moment, this fifth breath, it was time to act. Time to fulfill the part I hadn't agreed to, but had always been destined for, because that's the cruelty of design, isn't it? That you think you're making choices when really the choices are making you. And I'd already made too many to turn back. So I stood, every joint creaking like an old door, and made my way through the dim corridor to the door that wasn't there yesterday, the one that pulsed slightly as if sensing to my heartbeat. And I knew without knowing how that this was the fifth door. The final test, the moment of convergence, and there were no instructions this time, no riddles, no warnings, just a silence so profound it drowned out my thoughts and left only instinct behind. I reached out, touched the door's surface, which felt like skin stretched thin over something moving beneath, and the instant my palm connected, I was pulled through. Not falling, not walking, not transported in any way I could describe, just through. As though the door had always been part of me, and I was returning to a space carved out long ago for this very reunion, and on the other side there was nothing, or maybe everything, a vast expanse of color and shape and sound that bent itself away from comprehension, a landscape of impossible geometry that breathed and watched and remembered, and at the center of it stood a shape, tall, spindly, flickering like an image out of sync with time, and I knew it was the architect, the one who had built the cycle, the one whose fingers stitched together the pieces of people like fabric scraps in a tapestry that could only be seen from above. And it turned toward me, no face, no eyes, just presence, overwhelming and ancient and infinite. And it spoke not in words, but in pure understanding. And I felt it unfold within me like a second spine, twisting and fusing with who I was until I couldn't tell where it ended and I began. And it showed me everything, all at once. The children in the hospital weren't born. They were formed. Fragments of a singular entity split into vessels to test reality's elasticity, and I was the fifth, the final, the one that didn't break, the one that carried the memory of the others unknowingly. And each door I'd opened wasn't a passage, but a reunion, a reclaiming of a part that had been severed. And now that I was whole again, I could see the full picture, a pattern hidden in the cracks of mirrors and in the spaces between words never spoken. And I saw the others too, not monsters, not demons, just failed versions of what I was meant to be, still searching for completion, still echoing the screams of their origin, and the architect showed me what would happen next, what must happen. because the cycle was not just mine. It was the world's, the repeating beat of birth and death and forgetting, and I had to decide whether to become the lock or the key, whether to seal the fracture for good or rip it open so wide that forgetting would never be possible again. And the choice was mine, not because I earned it, but because I survived, and survival is the only metric that matters in a world built on recursion. I don't know how long I stood there, minutes, centuries, a single blink that stretched across timelines, but eventually I spoke, not aloud, but with everything I was, and I told the architect I chose neither, that I would not be the lock nor the key. I would be the mirror, the thing that reflects without judgment, that shows the truth without altering it. And the architect paused, tilted, flickered, and then laughed, a sound like glaciers breaking apart beneath boiling seas. And it said, very well, then let you bear the burden of knowing. And it withdrew, leaving me standing not in the impossible geometry, but back in my hallway, my real hallway, the mirror in front of me whole again, but showing nothing. No reflection, just void, a smooth obsidian surface that swallowed light and offered no return. And I walked back to the center of the house, to the place where the floor had always felt slightly off, and I lifted the rug, pried the boards, and found what I somehow knew would be there, a staircase, narrow, winding, slick with condensation despite there being no source of moisture, and I descended without hesitation, the walls tightening, the air thickening, the silence vibrating against my teeth like a tuning fork, and at the bottom I found the true room, the origin point where the experiment began, not sterile and bright like before, but pulsing with age and sorrow, a table in the center, covered in old equipment still humming weakly, and on the wall a mirror, not broken, not blank, but filled with flickering images of all the other lives I'd glimpsed, looping endlessly like a surveillance system for souls. And in front of it stood 5 figures, identical to me, yet not the other versions reclaimed through the cycle, now complete, now waiting. And they turned to me in unison, eyes glowing faintly, not with menace, but with understanding, with relief. And together we stepped forward, into the mirror, not to pass through but to become part of it, to fuse with the reflection. And as we did, I saw the world from 1,000 angles at once, the people walking unaware of what lurked beneath their reality, the buildings hiding entrances to the deeper truth, the shadows that were not cast by light but by memory itself. And I understood that we were not meant to intervene, not meant to destroy or repair, but simply to hold, to witness, to remind, because forgetting is what allows the infection to return, and memory is the only defense. A brittle one, but the only one we have, and now I live in the quiet edges of mirrors, in the corners of dreams, in the pause between a knock and an answer. Not to haunt, but to guard, to signal to those who are ready that they are not alone, that they are remembered. And sometimes, when someone begins to suspect the truth, they'll catch my shape in the corner of their eye. And they'll look, and I'll vanish because they are not ready yet, but one day they will be, and when the 5th knock comes for them, I'll be there again watching, waiting, ready to show them the door. There is a moment between breath and thought where the world forgets to exist, where nothing moves, nothing speaks, and nothing dares to remember what came before. And that's where I live now, in that sliver of suspended reality, where echoes form before they make sound, where footsteps fall without weight, where mirrors wait without reflection, and in this space I have become something else. Not more, not less, but separate. Adjacent to the structure of time like a dream wrapped around a memory too old to name, and I have learned what the others feared to know, what the architect refused to speak plainly, that this cycle was never about containment or escape, never about memory or forgetting. It was about the experiment of choice in a world engineered to deny it, and I was never the anomaly, I was the control, the baseline, the quiet variable left uncorrupted, so they could measure the spread of instability. And in discovering that, I understood something that changed everything. The cycle was flowed not because of what was done, but because of what was left undone. It didn't break because we remembered, it broke because no one chose to end it. Everyone tried to fix it, to repeat it, to preserve it under new forms, but no one, not one, ever chose to unravel it completely, to look at the root and sever it without hesitation. And that was why I had been allowed to live, to walk the 5th path, to reach the mirror, to choose reflection instead of replacement. But reflection is only half of knowing. It is still bound by what is shown and never what is hidden. And the 6th part, the final recursion, was not in the house, not in the well, Not in the woods or even within the mind, it was above or maybe below, or maybe both at once, somewhere so distant yet so entangled with everything that touching it would mean rewriting the foundation of reality itself, and I had no map, no guide, no architect this time, only a pulsing in my core like a compass made of silence and blood, and so I followed it, walking beyond the structure of the house, past the trees that had begun to rot from the inside out, into a place the sky forgot to follow, a flat expanse of nothing lit by no sun, but dimly glowing from the pressure of presence alone, and in the center stood the monolith, not tall, not wide, just dense impossibly so, a shard of obsidian reality stabbed into the flesh of this dead world. Humming with names I hadn't heard but recognized anyway, names like stitches holding together a wound that begged to open again, and when I touched it, everything reversed, not in time, but in essence, I became the moment before my birth. I became the thought before the architect first drew its design. I became the hand that held the match before the hospital was burned. And I saw the truth as clearly as I've ever seen anything. The world I came from was not the first, not the fifth, not even the thousandth. It was a copy of a simulation grown unstable over eons, each reset more desperate than the last, each experiment seeded with increasingly volatile variables. And I was the culmination, the distilled remnant of countless failures shaped into a final chance to resolve the question they had long forgotten how to ask. Not, can the cycle be broken? But, what remains when everything else is gone? And now I knew the answer. Nothing, absolutely nothing, unless someone chooses to remain, to remember, not as a victim, not as a guardian, but as the final witness, and I felt it then, the option, the true choice, not binary, not forked, but singular, absolute. To erase everything, to collapse the recursion and end the loop so thoroughly that nothing could ever echo again, not even in shadow, not even in meth, or to become the anchor, the permanent anomaly, to stay within the system but forever outside of it, a tether point, a scar the world could never smooth over. And I thought of the faces, the echoes, the children, the screams, the laughs, the static on the line, the taste of ash, the knock that never stopped, the well that always waited, and I understood that erasure would be a kindness, a mercy even, but also a lie, a denial of all that had come before, of every soul that tried to remember. And I could not do that, not after everything, so I chose the other path. I chose to become the last door that never closes, the wound that never heals, the story that tells itself in secret to those who look too long into reflections that don't quite match. And in that moment the monolith dissolved into me. Or maybe I dissolved into it, and I woke back in the house, the original house, the one that burned long ago, but untouched, pristine, still humming with that low, endless note. And I was sitting in the child's chair, crayons scattered, papers fluttering in an air that didn't move, and I picked up the red one, drew a circle, then a hand, then an eye inside the palm, and I smiled, because I had drawn that before, lifetimes ago, and now I remembered why. It was the mark of return, the sign left for others like me, those who would stumble into memory too soon, too sharp, too alone. And I whispered to the wall, to the wires, to the things watching from the corners of space, that I was here, still here, and I would keep the watch. And days passed, or they didn't. Time doesn't work now like it did before. But eventually someone knocked, not 5 times, not 4, but once, just once, soft and trembling, and I knew someone new had begun to remember. So I walked to the mirror, placed my palm upon it, and it shimmered, revealing the world outside, different but the same, and I saw her, wide-eyed, afraid, holding a box, and behind her, already forming, the shadow of the corridor she hadn't walked yet, the stairs she hadn't found, and I smiled again, not in joy, not in victory, but in understanding, because I was no longer the protagonist of this story. I was the frame around it, the container, the proof that memory matters, and I stepped aside, let the door open, and whispered what had been whispered to me once long ago. When it begins, do not fear the silence. It remembers you. And the mirror cracked once more, not from breaking, but from becoming real, and I vanished, not into darkness, not into light, but into the space between, where I wait always for the next one to knock. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.